So what were some of the other secrets that you built into the costumes?
Well, I didn't do this, and it's only because of lack of time. And I'm so sorry, Yvonne Strahovski and Eva Carradine, who I adore, both of them. I wanted to have something in their pockets. The commanders' wives were the only ones who could even have pockets because you can hide contraband, you can hide weapons, whatever, things to sell on the black market in your pockets, right? And so I, at first, was going to line the pockets of the commanders' wives because they don't really have sex anymore, do they? They have to watch their husbands have pleasure while they hope and pray for a baby. Right, that's going to work in the world. And so I thought, how can you have sensuality without, getting caught? That's hard. And so it has to be in the pockets, or it has to be, and this is something from being in school in England. I mean, I grew up an Episcopalian, loving the church, right? And loving Buddhism. But I was an altar boy. When I went to England, I was fascinated by the history and the churches. And the thing I loved were the things you weren't supposed to see unless you were sitting and praying for a long time, or, in the church pews or hidden underneath the church pews were these not sexual carvings, but imagery, kind of sticking their tongue out and making fun. And I was like, oh my God, these people had a sense of humor, right? So I was like, how can I do these little hidden things when you're supposed to be so pious and controlled by someone else? If it's in your pockets are important to me because I don't carry a bag. So I wanted to do either silk or a really luxurious cashmere or something like that to be a tactile, sensual thing so that at least the wives could have some pleasure beyond the external, trying to have power in their dress. And it wasn't that we couldn't afford it, although it probably came to that. It was that we didn't have time for anything off camera. Mm. I still managed to throw things in psychologically, but not that, yeah.
And Yvonne was actually pregnant in real life during...
Yes.
So talk about hiding a pregnancy.
Oh, no. I could have killed her, but I was too happy for her to say anything. So that was cuckoo because storyline-wise, she was meant to be infertile, right? Ultimately, she had a baby, right?
Later seasons.
I never watch anything because I'm too jealous afterward. But and I don't want to see what things look like after I'm done. But yeah, I remember she came to a fitting, and she's lovely. She's lovely and brilliant and so incredible as a muse and into the process. And so everything has meaning all the time, but really I was always trying to find her power amongst stories that weren't told yet and etc. And I was like, you can't say to someone, friend or not friend, actor, not actor, are you gaining weight, right? But we have all their measures because we have to make everything. And I was like, she feels different to me. She looks different. She wasn't showing. And my tailor was like, I think she's gaining weight. Probably just her moon. Probably no big deal. She's going to go back down. And then she whispered it to me. And I was like, okay, that's great. That's great. Miracle of miracles. We have to hide this because it would never happen in Gilead. And yeah, it's just about moving the waistline creatively. So you hide stuff. And we did. I don't know. Did it ever show? I'm not really sure. But I would have been fired if it showed. So yeah, she was pregnant. It's happened before to me on a film in the 1800s where we had to use corsets. I mean, talk about terrified. Yeah. I was like, I can't be the reason why you don't bring your baby to term. So it's always been a thing I'm ready for, I guess, because of not personal, but past experiences. Yeah, she was pregnant. Big miracle. And now she has 2 babies, but yeah, that was something for sure.
How did you choose that teal color for the wives' uniforms?
How did we choose the teal? So what color was... Oh, initially in the film, it was royal blue. And that really spoke to the decade we were in. The 90s was very primary, 1990, pardon me. So teal, how did we do that? Oh, I remember. The director's name is
Reed.
Reed.
Moreno.
So, yeah, that first pilot, listen, the clothing is all about color tones, right? And the society is delineated by those colors. So it could never be an afterthought, right? And we would have to live with it for season upon seasons. So there was that. The teal happened because after finding the red.
How did you find the red?
How do we find the red? Oh my God. I'm looking at all this red now because I stay away from red as as an Asian woman. It's so cliche. So there was a moment where I was wearing red in the 90s, and then I was like, I'm never wearing red or red lipstick or have long hair because it's so typical, right, for Asians. And I didn't forever, and now I do. But when I was trying to find the red, your eye just goes to wherever in the room. Your jacket, that glass, that rug, outside, wherever you can find it. And where I was in Canada was this beautiful industrial room, all concrete, perfect for Gilead, gray. Except there was this beautiful bright red pipe that is used during a fire or something. It had whatever cautionary signs on it. And I was like, that red is so beautiful. And there were 1,000 shades of red, and we went back and forth, me, Reed, and the DP. And then there was this beautiful photograph of Canadian maples, which are just maples in our country. It was a photograph, and on the edges they were just a shadowy edge, but it was teal. And, for me, I was like, the red is one of the hardest colors in TV, in film. You don't use it, certain reds, because it looks hideous and it never looks like what it is. And so for me, after banging my head, how can I solve this puzzle? Because in the original story, it was a story for just white women and white people, but we were going to have every beautiful shade, right, of person and all races. And I thought, now, every red does not look good on every skin tone. And so, ultimately, I thought the color of blood. It's all the same color for everybody. You can't make a mistake because it's in nature. And so, I likened that to a woman getting her moon or her menses. And that's a poignant color to choose in terms of fertility going down, as it is in real life today and in the story. And so the color of someone's menses was the right red, because ultimately, sounds dumb, but it looks good on everybody, that color red, but also it speaks to something huge not said. And it looked like the color in the photo that Reed had. And then the edges being teal. I mean, if you look at this rug, or if you look at, if complementary colors, or things that are opposite that really work well together, that teal was the perfect complement to the red, even though it's a secondary color, that teal. But somehow I knew that they were the exact opposite. So in the frame, psychologically, they would be the absolute opposite of need to a commander and a force together to intimidate when that might happen later in another season. And very different emotions, right? Cold, emotional in a different way, poignant, moody, sad. The color of water. And then the other one is fire, emotional, fertile, reactionary. So it did everything right. Yeah.
There were a few other elements within the handmaid's costume as well. You included an obi or a corset.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I tried to do an obi on this job again. There's certain things that come back to one's life that you try to run from. And certainly my mom is Okinawan, which is not Japanese. They were taken over by the Japanese. But there are elements to Okinawan and Japanese costume. And one of those is the obi. And I love it, and I used to run from anything Okinawan or Japanese as a kid. I was like, I want to be an English punk. I don't want anything to do with anything Asian. And that didn't work because it's inherent in your DNA. And so why did I choose the obi? I know why. Because I had to solve the riddle of pregnancy, not pregnant, in a uniform. Could we have changed everything when someone got pregnant? Yes. But story-wise, there are only a small few who were infertile. And listen, again, in a mirror to real life, I was struggling with infertility for so long in California. But I always had a belly, and people would always say, "Are you pregnant?" And it was like the worst thing and the best thing, but the worst thing someone could say. And so I was like, I'm never going to wear things with a waist because boom. And I was like, oh, waist. What is sexual to a man in another time when you can't see someone's décolleté, their décolletage, their boobs, or their butt, or their waist, or skin? What is sexy inherently to a man or a woman, but in olden days to a man? A woman's waist. Tiny, tiny, tiny for all time amongst many cultures. And so I was like, there's something about a waist and femininity and fertility that you can't deny if you're trying to not be sexual as a inherent response to your own needs as a human being, sexually, sensually. You're drawn to a woman's waist. And also because that is the place just under where the womb, where your belly grows to be able to have children, which is such an anomaly in our modern future, near future of Gilead. It's almost like fertility in babies becomes the sexual thing, right? Because it's so unheard of and never happening anymore. And so when one brings in someone's waist, it also enhances the boobs. Quietly, secretly, in a non-verbal way. And so what I wanted to do, again, was give power to a handmaid, quietly. The only power they have is that they're fertile, right? That's all they got. And it's their way of staying alive, too. And so I started with the waist, and I thought, okay, if, again, I'm that tyrant who is creating this utopia, this new world, we only have a select amount of goods to make these clothes. We only have a certain amount of money to make this work. Ultimately, people will die and will recycle these clothes. It's like being a horrible person, thinking, how can we give them the least? And honestly, I also visited Dachau and a few concentration camps, when I was in England and traveling across Europe. And I thought, they gave them the least, they made them look the same to take away their power, and they recycled things out of necessity. So I want that to happen. And then as a fashion person, I sound so twisted now, but all of these selves do come into play in the design. As a fashion person, I was like, I'm traveling all the time. In the new world, you don't have 10,000 clothes. You're recycling, you're buying recycled, as I did today. You are traveling light. Pardon me, sorry. You're traveling light because of time and place and life circumstances. And what is the easy through line to make clothes for the new world? 5 easy pieces. That's all you get. Whether you hate women, like the handmaids, and you're terrible to them, or you're harnessed with this idea of having to not spend a lot of money to make this new world work. There is no money flow, it's all trade. And so, you design a dress that can be worn pregnant or not pregnant. It's big enough to handle 9 months hopefully of having a baby. And then when you have that baby, unfortunately, you have to give it to the people who own you, and you put your obi on, because that's the only way they can tell if you're pregnant, when you're marching in a line from far away with all of these cameras watching, or just on high, with the guardians looking, who's pregnant, who's acting weird, who's sick, who's fainting. The waist is an easy way to do that. And so how do you do that in a beautiful way? Honestly, as a kid who grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s of fashion, I looked at people like Jeffrey Beam, like Halston, and there's a million, Adrian, Yves Saint Laurent. They would make these beautiful belts that were kind of based on the old world of Orientalism, which is a kind of trapunto stitched obi. Ultimately, it's an obi. Another big garment, a kimono with an obi on top to control all the fabric. It's kind of scientific. It's kind of twisted, trying to play creatively with my mind to be a commander. And it's very elegant and lean design that makes sense, so that people who are watching are like, damn, you open the closet in season 1 and you see 2 dresses. That wasn't by mistake. That was my design. You have to believe what you're seeing, or it doesn't matter.
So then the other pieces they get the wings, they get like a cape or a cloak.
Yeah.
And boots.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, believe it or not, I don't know where they went with this in subsequent seasons. I did seasons 1 and 2, but there was a summer and winter version. And the only thing they were given, I had a name for it. I forgot what it was called. The Special. I think it was called The Special. Maybe not. Maybe I can't find it, but in my brain. But we liked the way that things were kind of indirectly specialized when someone threw a sweatshirt over it or things like that. And, those pieces of clothing exist in the world and make it modern. And so actually Lizzie had this great idea. She was like, hey, maybe they get their special from those clothing bins that you see for donations. And I was like, yeah, and that way we can start to, in a very subtle way, in a very small way, real estate on the body wise, interject who they were and where they came from prior to being a handmaid. And so we had that, which came into play on Lizzie. It was a sweatshirt. It was a little tiny knitted piece on, I'm never going to remember everybody's names, but they were very individualized. And, we did things that were hand knit, because what are the wives going to do? What are the handmaids going to do? The wives are going to make babies' clothes all the time, right? And so the idea of knitting was helpful for a few easy pieces that were going to be for winter. I love spats. I hate to say it, but I'm still designing spats because I can't get over that influence of the military, right? And so, but it's also a beautifully utilitarian engineered garment that actually has a purpose. And that's what I like. That's how I design. So no different for the Handmaid's Tale. I was like, no commander in their right mind is going to give them like a closet full of shoes for summer and winter. No, it's going to be lace-up boots, but they can't have laces because they could hang themselves, right? So we're going to take away even that freedom to hang yourself. We're going to sew that down. We're going to put spats on top, so you can't even dream about the idea of killing yourself. And that spat will be shorter in the summer and longer in the winter, right? And the cloaks ultimately were made. I wanted to make everything out of wool gabardine, which sounds like a super nerd thing to say, but that is one of the items of fabric that hasn't changed through time. And I wanted that kind of heavy, emotionally, visually heavy cloak that did keep them warm and you could wear in the summer, because that's what we used to do in the 1900s. Like, what hasn't changed in the world and our clothing that could look like, and in real life politically, was still a sentence to a woman, whether it was before we had our rights or now, where we still don't have our rights. That would be certain fabrications, certain kinds of fabric that make the clothing heavier emotionally. Yeah.
So all that is pretty much set up season 1.
I know.
Season
There's still a lot
2.
more, but yes, I digress.
Season 2, then we meet the unwomen of the colonies.
The unwomen.
We meet the Econo people. Tell us about.
Yeah.
I mean, did you know when season 2 was coming around? You'd already committed. You knew you were going into it. New worlds.
You never know anything, right? Everything is a crapshoot, and then you decide if you want to play the game of the crapshoot of the craps or not. No, and Unwomen were actually season 1, because that was one of the places where, while they were all gray, I could mix it up a teeny weeny bit, right? The Unwomen, no, that was a story of the colonies, right? And that was a whole new chapter, not from the book, although it was talked about. We never saw it. So, yeah, that was a whole new undertaking. And part of the reason why I came back, because it was never seen before, you know, and that was a challenge. And it always has to be a challenge for me. So yeah, the Unwomen, lots and lots and lots and lots of research and lots of blocks, lots, terrifying blocks, because who knew that season 1 was going to take off? Who knew that politics and life would follow in such a very close parallel way? Who knew that our president would, in effect, be a commander? You know, who knew any of these things? And so, great. I'm so glad the world is watching, and they're horrified or excited by the storylines. My mother wouldn't watch it after the pilot, neither would my dad. But I don't blame them, right? When something's too close to home, you don't watch. But I had no idea what I could conceive of at all. I felt like I was a sponge that had been wrung dry, and I felt quite fraudulent, to be honest, coming back. And listen, you always know that something, whatever you believe in, is going to come in and save you and be the spark that you need to create something. But I didn't have it. I always work Saturdays. It's kind of a thing. It's stupid. I never get paid for it. So imagine all that time, every Saturday for 35 years. I sat in Canada and thought, what have I done? I got nothing. I got no music. I got no colors. Like, I feel like I have to tell them, you know? And somehow I couldn't say the word the colonies. And this is a kind of thing. It's really weird. I don't believe in all the different, new things that people have. I just say it's kind of an avoidance or an energy thing or whatever. And so I was having that. I had an avoidance of the word. And it's weird. It's like a tell, you know. I cannot not tell the truth. It's in my body. If I were to go to Vegas, which I don't do, people would know I was doing something wrong or underhanded, because I would show it in my body, or that I didn't have the cards. I said, I don't have the terminology. But the same was true with the colonies. And I felt terrible, because the first few meetings, I just sat there. Because why lie, you know, that this other idea that I don't have. And so finally, I kept calling it, and I do this all the time, I call things the wrong name. There is a term for that. And I do it because I can't fathom that it's anything else. It sounds like a real problem. I kept calling the colonies the bitter earth, or this bitter earth, like the bitter earth, because it was a place where people's skin would be eaten away. It was toxic. It was, again, the place where we've put all the chemicals, right? And women are banished to be there and basically die. And to me, that was like everything combined, you know, anything from people with, in the olden days, you would put people with not just smallpox, but like with your skin deteriorating.
Oh, like leprosy?
Leprosy into these colonies, right? I somehow figured out the word right just then. But I called it this bitter place, this earth that no one was allowed to go to. And I just, the mantra was this bitter earth. And I was probably bitter because I couldn't think of what to do. And actually, my assistant at that time for season 1, who still worked on it season 2, Courtney Mitchell, who's now a great designer in Canada, said to me, and my ex at the time, you always find your way through music. I just can't remember that's the steps. And so I forced myself to go into the office, which was haunted, by the way. And I'm actually grateful because I think that has a whole inspiration on its own. Really haunted, really scary. And I Googled this bitter earth out of desperation. You know, I always go in when it's dark, again, usually between 3 and 5. Not only because it's quiet, because it's the most fertile time for my imagination. Stupid. Just Google This Bitter Earth. The first thing that pops up is the song This Bitter Earth from Dinah Washington, which is a mashup with Max Richter. And it's haunting. It's beautiful. And I played it. And I had the same reaction as I did season 1 when Lizzie gave me that song. Blondie. And sorry, that was Philip Glass, the first season. And I played it, and couldn't stop. It was on repeat. I played This Bitter Earth while working on the first Handmaid's, first colony hat. And it was this kind of weird being in a chasm, where you're holding yourself with the same sound and the same repetitive strings, which are very emotional. And it was as if a woman, an unwoman from the colonies, was singing about her plight. It was almost like a mini operetta in my office. Bizarre and beautiful and huge. And I sketched everything, you know. And also because I didn't want to be embarrassed anymore. When my team came in, I'm like, this is it. This is the colonies, right? And it's based on Russian constructivism and, you know, the toxic wastelands that we're making people in third world countries work in. And children, by the way. And here are the pieces. And here's how they fall apart. And here's how we rinse them down, thinking about Dachau. And the toxins they would shower people with, right? All of that became the colonies. And it was beautiful, I'm going to cry, terrifying, and really sad. And if I can reach an emotional state, not only in the first reading of a script, but in the first incarnation of the why of the costume, I know now, finally, at 58, I know I have something. I always forget in between, but if I reach that state, the truth will be there and the good design will be there. Yeah.
Conversely, I mean, that sounds very emotionally taxing. So
yes.
At the end of the day, are you able to like decompress? Do you have a ritual to sort of...
That's interesting. There might be a glass of wine or two involved. Which is another state of being. No, you know what? I do go away a lot. I haven't, oddly, on this one. But, yes. You know what? Season 1, I had the luxury of knowing where to run season 2 by being there season 1. And Canada has this incredibly rich Indigenous culture. And I'm Indigenous Okinawan, and I pay attention to signs, kind of, that can give me answers in my work, to put it in a small way. And so season 1, it's a long story, but the short version is I kept waking up at 3:33 at 3:33 in the morning, and I was like, what the hell, why do I keep waking up at 3:33? This hasn't happened since my last residency, which is when I kept waking up at 3:33. And I went to this place called Manitoulin Island in Canada, very, very far north. So far north that it would take 7 hours to drive back. And I would do it on the weekend and drive all that time before call. Can you imagine what time I left in the darkness and the fog? So that I would be in a heightened state of pure creativity again when I got to work. And Manitoulin Island has much folklore, and it's somehow, I forget how this happened. A lot of it's always by accident. But season 1, and it will pertain to season 2. Season 1, Janine. Maddie. I love you, Maddie. Came in, and she's such a fiery, I don't know, real artist and real shapeshifter. And she's so young. You don't expect it. But she can just combust into a Janine, right? And she came out. There was like this kind of opening for the fitting room. And to the right, I had put her picture. I had met her on another job that she was on. I drove through the middle of Georgia to find her for this fitting. And she had white dreads. And I threw the white bonnet on her. And she looked like a ghost, kind of haunting. But somehow, the combination of things, I had put 333 on the wall and the coordinates of this Manitoulin Island simply because I like the visual. But those coordinates equaled 333, and I forget how. But there was also some Great Lakes involved because, too much. But so that was season 1, and so I threw the 333 into the design, right, of some of the things nobody knew. Season 2, I was like, yeah, 333, I got it. No, it didn't happen. It's not only 333, waking up at 3:33, my whole body would spin the opposite direction. And I don't move in bed because I have narcolepsy, so go figure. It's happening here, which is great. I take it as a good sign. It's like a human compass or something. But season 2, sounds so banal. I was waking up at 4:44. I'm like, okay, season 2, 4:44, whatever. And I kind of used that in the design as well. I think in the Unwomen, I'm not sure, but I kind of knew to go with things that were kind of creative triggers or dreams or whatever, throw them into the work, and also go to specific places in Canada that I feel would give me kind of a creative electric charge to feed whatever it was that was creating the design. By that I mean we're all just vessels. It doesn't all come from us. I believe that wholeheartedly now. It comes from elsewhere that we can't even explain. Part of it is us. And so with season 2, I wasn't looking forward to going back into that storyline because it was too personal, but ultimately I knew that kind of powder keg pressure is a means to extreme creativity that might last, be long lasting for something, for the story or me or whatever. Mm-hmm.
And then with the Econo people, you chose to not do what was written in the book.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was only that she had striped fabric and I went with gray. And, listen, the stripe thing wouldn't have worked because you can only find that in history in very bizarre ways, certainly Auschwitz, but you find it in stockings in the Wild West, in a certain time, 1800 prostitutes, or you find it in Pierrots, you know, or like, I don't know, 1900s Austria or Vienna, you know. And so it was so specific to time and place. I couldn't find a way in that didn't look completely out of place with the rest of the world. And so I think I just said to Bruce and Warren and Margaret Atwood, would you mind if we don't do stripes? Maybe it's blasphemy to say, because I love your book so much, but I think it's going to separate the Econo people too much. And the Econo people are the workers, right? And there's ways of doing that where you don't have to have pattern. And to me, the Econo people were my parents, you know, working in factories and trying to help society by, what's the word? Sacrificing their own creativity or their own wants. You know, my dad wanted to be a weatherman. My best friend was the only weatherman. Her father was the only weatherman, so that's a terrible karmic thing for my dad to have to deal with across the street. And then my mom, I don't really know. It's funny, I've never asked her, but I always felt guilty, you know, as an immigrant's kid, that they had to work in factories. And the work is very, you know, monetized for sure, but like terrible. Like it's the same thing over and like very robotic. And so to me, growing up and in college, I did this whole like series of gray, right? The in-between. The in-between for a kid growing up in the Midwest South, that's gray, is a state of mind where no one sees you, where it's monotony, where it's the color that's acceptable because it doesn't shout, you know, all those things I hated about our family situation in that place. However, on the flip side, it's gray can be really soothing and quiet and meditative and the color of water. You can you know, shapeshift into something else. And so what I decided to do after it was approved to use gray was to create a kind of individualized look within, again, a few easy pieces, because nobody has the time or inclination to make anyone individual in Gilead. But it was a color that could look okay, the kind of gray I chose for all skin tones. And I decided I'm basically an Econo person, right? In Gilead, what am I going to wear? Well, really, it's whatever I wear when I'm traveling. You know, it's a warm vest, not too heavy, not too light on the plane, or in different climates, because I go from Morocco to Tokyo to London to New York and California. All the weather's different. What do? You layer. And so for their own dignity, I decided, you know, it's all empathy, right? I just realized all of my designs are about empathy and empathizing with the character and dignity, which is basically speaking to what my parents didn't have, right? In society, in my mind. I mean, they were well loved and they're brilliant, but they weren't seen, right? And so, yeah, the Econo people, I wanted to make sure they felt okay about their lot in life being of service to work for the greater good of the commanders and all their roles, the factory people, basically, yeah.
So you've also talked about how, you know, sort of Gilead as now, as oppression women today are feeling. And just to sort of set the timeline, season 1 shot in 2016.
I guess it did. I get confused because you always are working a year in advance. But yeah, I guess we prepped in 2015 and shot 2016 and 17.
Yes.
And I left at the beginning of 2018. Yeah.
Okay. So in there's the U.S. presidential election, November 2016.
Yes.
The show, I think, starts airing in the U.S. in April of 2017.
Okay.
And not too long after that, we start to see the handmaid's costume being used in real life political protests.
Yeah.
I think the first time was in Texas.
Yeah.
When a group of women were protesting anti-abortion laws there.
Yeah.
Talk about what it meant to you to see that costume that you created being utilized in that way.
Yeah. Let's talk about the present. My heart just sunk when you said
Yeah.
it. Listen, I mean, I'm really open that The Handmaid's Tale did not come from me. It came from Margaret Atwood, and in fact, she wrote it in 1980. How long ago was that? It had such a huge impact on me as a young lady in New York City who came from a world of rules in the Midwest, whether politically or religiously, right? To see that, I remember that, can we curse on this or
yes,
not?
Please.
Oh, Lord of mercy, I've been so good.
No.
But I was so fucked up when I came back from The Handmaid's Tale, simply because you are in this heightened state for however many months, I don't know, 6, 9, I can't remember, and in another country, but you're not even realizing, because you are here and your head's down and you're like, I must create, I must take all this in, and I must deliver on time and fight the weather and keep the actors warm, all these things. It's not until you finish a job that you realize the trajectory and the journey. And of course, being there's no Americans there. I mean, it's just me and I forget, maybe a few actors and the producers, but like in the largesse of Canada, I was always reminded by how a socialist country is different and the same as a capitalist country. And the embarrassment that comes with certain things that happen in the news. And so when I first came back at the end of the season, I was really in this place of, how can I look at America again? How can I reconnect with America again? And it's that Woody Guthrie's America. How can I love America again and be proud of her? There's birds outside building a nest, by the way. Love that. How can I embrace the good of America while looking at some things that are not good? And the only thing I could think about was, and I felt guilty because I'd been away so long and, left my dog and partner here at that time. And I came back and I said, I need to go on a journey. And he was like, I'm not surprised. You always do. And I'm like, I have to see the good in America. How can I do that? I think I don't want to drive because I want to write while I'm doing it and write what I see. And so I had heard for a couple of years about a beautiful Amtrak journey. I forgot the name. Pacific Starlight? It's a weird name. It sounds like a fairy tale book and not a very good name. Coastal Starlight or something like that. I highly recommend it, especially if you have a partner, because it's very romantic. But it is the old style of traveling through the United States. And it's from Los Angeles, the beautiful old Union Station, which is tremendous, all the way up to Seattle. And I was like, I bet you I could figure out America by taking that journey. Plus you're going through nature, so what's to hate, right? It was phenomenal. It was meditative. It was listening to the sound of the train hitting the train tracks, right? And so many writers take this journey. I had no idea. They used to have a program that I really wanted to join, but it's gone now. But I could see America. And I could see, very, what's the word? Altruistic? Like this beautiful golden light over certain parts of America, albeit on the west side only. But I also saw what was happening in Gilead. Severe homelessness in cities that was hit, because the train will take you to areas that you don't see on certain roads. Of course, now that happened in Los Angeles overnight while I was gone. But beautiful $300, $500 tents and expensive bikes, you know, near Washington, near Oregon, you know, under the bypasses, under trains. You know, I was like, wow. But that trip helped me in a weird way to silence most of my work, you know, on myself. I have to do alone, and I have to do that visually. I can't do it with a partner. I can't do it with a best friend. Often, maybe I'll do it with my dog, because I have to be nonverbal to let go of things and to get ready creatively for the next thing. And so often I'll go on, I didn't want to say it because I don't want to tell the secret, but a very special place up north at a monastery and not speak for a week or longer, right? And so, yeah, it was a very nonverbal, visual, extremely romantic way to travel and to see the United States. And so that kind of righted me in the way that I needed to. Was it perfect? No. But it, was I able to shake things? I thought so. I was still pretty effed up, you know, for years after, because I didn't deal with the personal side. I just kind of dealt with the political side. I'm all about women's rights, but sometimes I forget about my own, you know, in terms of the past. And so, yeah, I ultimately couldn't go back for a third season, because it wasn't till then, after a whole season of 1, a whole season 2, and thinking about season 3, there's many things I can't say, but one of those things was, you know, I can either go back and create an amazing thing for many viewers, or I can destroy myself in the process, or I can choose to allow myself to think you've done your work creatively and you can tell a new story. You know, it was a sacrifice either way, right? Because you don't want to let go of something that at the same point, inspires and horrifies you. That, to me, seems to be my thing that gets the best work out of me. And it was a sacrifice for real, but ultimately it was the right thing. Yeah.
Was seeing the costumes used in protests something else that sort of righted you in a way? That it would bleed over and be used in a cause that you believe in?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, you know, it's like The Handmaid's Tale has so many different incarnations? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moments in time because of the power it had. Really, for better or worse, but really for better. Because there's the timeline of the season, season 1, season 2, and that's you're hired at this point and you're hired to go to this point. Well, Hulu was amazing because they saw the value before I did of what the costumes were going to do. And so what the costumes ended up doing is, I remember every time a phone call came or a Twitter or something, or phone call, to say, oh my God, look where they are now. But the very first time I returned, and you always come with a hell of a lot of baggage, literally and figuratively, after a job, right? There's this whole unpacking of not only your suitcases, but your whole, where you've been and how to get back into society. And I was unpacking, and I had a little ladder, because I had a little place in Echo Park, and I was trying to put everything back. And I got this weird tweet or call, I can't remember, or text. And it was a woman in Texas saying, hey, we're going to do this, and it's going to be a thing. And you don't know me, but it's going to be a very good thing, positive thing. And is there a way you can help us, give us your secrets about how you made the costume so we can be impactful? And I, being from Kentucky and a straight shooter, I was like, heck yeah. And I was like, oh, actually, I can't. It's illegal. Like, I'll get sued. It's all owned, by something else now. And so while it is my idea, I cannot help you, but I can't not help you. I must help you. And so I figured out a way to help give them ideas about how to do their own version. And there it was. There it was. It was like, I'm going to cry. It was stunning. It was literally not stunning just in the gorgeous way and beautiful way. It was like I was stunned into paralysis mode, because it's not something you think about. You guys showed up here for work today to go through your list of what you have to accomplish so that you can edit it and fulfill your job, right? That's what I was doing in Canada for Hulu on a job I was hired to do for this budget with all of these people and everything that happens day to day. That's kind of mundane, to be honest with you. But the in-between that I inevitably brought from my own life, and that kind of psychological real glue and truth-telling in the design crept in. And I think it didn't happen on the first thing. And I knew it was big, but I was like a fighter. I'm a prize fighter when it comes for women's rights. So I was thinking about that. I was like, yes, fucking finally, And oh my God, what will they think? Will they think, oh, it's just a TV show and these are just the costumes? And it kind of was building in many different ways. Season 1, from that and real protest to fashion being like, hey, this is cool, let's do this, right? So many collections, so many countries with different collections fashion-wise. And you can't help but see it because we're inspired. I just realized my dress looks like a weird handmaid's dress with points that I'm wearing today. It's really fucked up. But anyway, I didn't think about that when I got it. I did see the correlation. Some of it was stupid, like people I won't name, who monetize everything, who made it into a Halloween costume. No, Or yes, because that's your prerogative and that's your freedom to utilize any inspiration, any way that you want. Was I precious about it secretly? Yeah, I wanted it to be used for good, I guess, for a reason. You never want something you've done as a creator, as a writer, as a musician, as an artist, as a costume designer, as a filmmaker, to be the butt of a joke or to be stupid, right? You want it, in the end, we're all here because we're hoping to make a lasting image. And if we can't make a lasting image, then a lasting feeling of having lived a good life with lasting inspiration for others on earth. That's it. And so did it do that? I hope so, in my mind. And then before I got to season 2 and all through season 2, God bless Hulu, they gave me this platform to experience how that costume was affecting, and the show. First, the show. It's a TV show. It's make-believe. It's a brilliant mirror to society from Margaret Atwood. And the combination of that travel to different parts of the country, meeting women from all walks of society, from different cultures, who would say to me, we would basically, I think, premiere an episode and I would speak on it before or after. I don't know. It was like alchemy again. I would have women coming up to me saying, thank you, because you gave voice to us. And I felt like a fraud. I'm like, no, I didn't. This is a costume from a TV show, and the story is amazing. And they were like, it's our story. And it was literally women from all over the world. And thank you to Bruce Miller and Hulu, because I ended up speaking, at what is it?
The UN.
The UN. Oh my God. I just like got caught up in the memory of all these women and actually having my own coming out story of what happened to me. And I remember I landed in New Jersey. I mean, when you're on a job and you're in a season, especially in TV, your world and your time are not your own. And unless you really fight hard for it, which I never do, because I want to be drowned and I want to be imbued with this story in every aspect of my life until I'm done, right? And so often it was like having two jobs of traveling for Hulu, which was brilliant, but taxing, you know, and being present and designing and doing everything strongly for season 2. But I remember I landed in New Jersey and I was like, oh, I should call my parents and let them know, because they weren't watching the show. They're not looking at all these things. I won't say what news they were watching, but it wasn't good. And, or it was their news that they needed to see. But I said, hey, I'm being asked to speak to the UN today. And, you know, I hadn't really voiced everything to them that happened to me as a kid. I had once, after a glass of wine, and it was triggering for everybody in the family. And it's so interesting because, you know, Asians don't speak readily, don't emote, and don't tell secrets. And, you know, the white side of me, the American side, who knows, you know. But my family wasn't a family that would say very much. And I just remember kind of being like at a loss for words in New Jersey and kind of saying, I don't want to embarrass the family. I don't want to tell secrets, but I'm in this place where I could help a lot of women, you know? And it's kind of beyond me now. Like I feel it might be part of my responsibility. It's no joke. I don't take it lightly. And my mom didn't speak, and I could read everything she wasn't saying. And my dad said so quietly, and I thank him because he's gone now, he said, you're a survivor, Anne. And no one says those words in my house because then we're alluding to stuff. And I was like, what? And he goes, you're a survivor. And so you kind of have to do what you need to do. And we hung up. I drove to the hotel across from the UN, and I just kind of rocked back and forth. Like, what is the truth of what I need to experience so that I feel like it wasn't just a job well done, but I am fulfilling whatever it is, God, Buddha, who knows, the ancestors, the angels have put me here to do. And okay, it's just a job. These are just costumes. You know, I am someone who gets hired on this date and my expiration date is here. But what happens if it lives further past the expiration date? And what happens if you've been told to fill this vessel, and when it's full, you're done, but it doesn't have any walls, this vessel. It goes beyond. You kind of have to follow that or turn your back on it. And to me, turning your back on that is more painful because you would have always been saying to yourself at 200 when you finish working, what if I could have done something? What if I could have said something? Why am I here if this is bursting through the boundaries from the page and the script and the job at hand? There's got to be something else, you know, some force. You know, every artist, many, I will say, to be truthful, me, I believe that inspiration doesn't just come from me. And I know that. And recently I've been following Rick Rubin, who I fucking adore, who has said it. And I'm like, God, that's how I felt the whole way. Like, it wasn't a lie. And I feel that way. Like, yes, we're hired for a job. Yes, we are paid for our intellect, our artistry, and our therapy skills with actors and directors and producers. But ultimately, one hopes at the end of the day to be a real empty vessel and a vehicle to which any divine inspiration, whatever you want to call it, is utilized to the best of our ability and beyond, because there's always more you can do. And I literally call it and call upon it in my life, because I don't want to leave pollution out there. I want to leave beauty and inspiration and thought-provoking ideology. I mean, call me an egoist, but that's what I want to do. And if I design a good costume here or there, cool. I did what I signed up to do, you know?
I mean, it sounds like you poured your personal journey and you did a ton of research. It's something that resonated with a lot of people all over the world.
Yeah.
And it actually, Elizabeth Moss's costume is now in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian.
Yeah, it is.
What does that mean to you? And I think you went there and you observed it and everything.
I did. Here's the best thing. I went from running from Kentucky and kind of running away from my family a little bit because of stuff. And then doves are ancestors, by the way, and people who have passed. That's cool. Thanks, Dad. You know, at 47, I'm 58, 11 years ago, I decided that I should share what I do with my parents, because it's so abstract. They never get to see anything. They didn't have cable. They don't, all the films don't go there. And by any means necessary, for better or for worse, show them, reveal the man behind the curtain. It's just work, right? And so I brought them to rectify. And then as we got older, and I'm like, okay, my dad has some health issues, and how can I help them understand what's happening? You can't just talk about it. If you're in Kentucky, and you're not seeing the show and you're not seeing news channels that talk about it in a positive way. And so what I decided to do for the last couple years of my dad's life and with my mom was to include them on anything like that. So, and my nieces, who, beyond me being a person of mixed heritage and mixed races, so are the people who've come afterward, and including my nieces, great nieces, sorry. I always forget that. Okinawans, okay, I'm 58 going on 59, but we think we live until 200, so I feel like an infant still, sorry. My great nieces are really multiracial, and it's still kind of a new thing to see people of color and women of color in museums. And so, the last couple years, I was bringing them to everything. My parents to the Emmys, but also my niece and her two daughters to the Smithsonian, my parents and my sweetheart at the time to the Smithsonian, my little brother, because I've been absent for most of my adult life, right? By choice, and also, that's just what happened. And so if I could share the beautiful aftermath of all that work and that absence, it's a good payoff, and it's a good trade-off for them feeling okay about how I turned out, because probably without all those beautiful glittering things, it just looks like I'm highly selfish or a freak who gets paid for strange ideas, right? I mean, ultimately. And so the Smithsonian was super huge. It wasn't the first exhibition. I brought my parents to that and others, to everybody I just mentioned, to Georgia for my first exhibition, opposite Pierre Cardin, by the way, and it was his giant show. And my mother, of course, knows Pierre Cardin, and that was huge. That was really huge for her to physically see her daughter next to her work in a museum. I mean, it made the whole art, don't study fashion conversation so much better because people were paying to see it now. I mean, it's like, not to be selfish, but I was like, thank God, thank God that worked out. When it came to the Smithsonian, it's nuts because, the Smithsonian is huge. And as Bruce Miller told me, it's like America's attic, he calls it. And so there's 90% not on view that's in the archives. And he was like, Anne, and Warren Littlefield, they were like, Anne, this is going to be on permanent view. I don't know that it actually is right now. I think I read that it's not. That's okay, Smithsonian. But they came, and it was a really big deal for my father, who loves history, loves Washington, loves the Smithsonian. And I think it wasn't even just the big thing that happened, the party, the opening of it. Opposite, by the way, from the ruby slippers, who were designed by Adrian, who, by the way, is from Indiana. I mean, this happens over time, smaller people from smaller towns, big ideas that can't be contained in those small places, so they go elsewhere. But I find it interesting that often designers, artists, etc., are from little places. And so I loved it that I was opposite Adrian. The thing that really happened was that my father and mother, little brother, my niece, my great nieces, were able to see Washington, D.C. My father could go visit all the veterans, monuments. The biggest thing that I remember before the Smithsonian event was we went to see the beautiful statue of Lincoln, huge, looming, that I had seen in films like Logan's Run, like iconic. And my mother, I was reading this beautiful words that were, I think, on the base of the chair or higher, higher. My mother was reading the words, tears rolling down her face. She was shaking. And I'm looking at her and crying just because it's so big. And she had studied that in high school and memorized it when she came to the United States for her papers to become a U.S. citizen. And there it was, made manifest in the flesh, right? And it was a huge moment for her as an American. And then we all got dressed up and went to the Smithsonian for the opening. And my dad was carrying an oxygen machine because his lungs had been messed up. And he ran around like a little boy. I remember that they said, okay, well, tonight's the big party and we have everything structured. And my dad was like, I guess he loves history. Man, the next day they gave us a private tour of the Smithsonian. You couldn't find my dad. He ran with his oxygen tent, literally, so he could see everything before he left. And in hindsight, I think he knew he didn't have a lot of time left. And that was a personal dream. Like the Lincoln Memorial was a personal dream for my mom. And to me, listen, it, in a small way, yes, it makes you feel good that you made choices so your parents aren't embarrassed about you, right? And the choices you've made. On a bigger note, it's those little girls. I'm going to lose it. Those brown-skinned little girls, they saw a person of color dream up something that was emotionally charged for women's rights. That's just one thing. But to see a relative, a person of color from very modest means, to be honest, growing up, I don't know if they will remember, but I know the moments of being a poor kid in Kentucky and being taken to the opera by a friend of the family, or the theater, or a trip to New York by John Streetman, who I still know today, who took me and my friend with all these old ladies to New York, these museum members. And from that trip, he took me to, I remember walking down the marble stairs, of the Metropolitan Museum to see a Diana Vreeland and Armani exhibition. Never thought, costumes, an exhibition on costumes in a movie. What is that job? You know, he took me there, and it lasted. So who knows how many little kids are walking through the Smithsonian or any tiny local art exhibit, or being read the classics to them at night, or hearing beautiful classical or rap music, and how that will be embedded in the brain for a wonderful, not only career, but life later. Millions. Thank God. There are millions of people who walk through the Smithsonian every day. And hopefully my nieces will retain that. And any young lady, because it is a symbol of freedom in and of itself. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I know. Get me out of here. I got to cry.
Let's stop there and take a break.